This is Plant-Based Briefing, Nutritional Deficiencies on Plant-Forward Diets by Julia Ryan at balanced.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson, and this is the curated content Plantbased podcast, where I narrate a variety of articles on plant-based and vegan living in about 10 minutes or less every weekday, with permission. Today's post is from balanced.org. They're a nonprofit network of public health professionals, nutrition science experts, and everyday people from around the world. They're fighting for a healthier food system, one menu at a time. They're influencing nutrition policy in schools, hospitals, and offices in cities around the world, impacting the healthfulness of millions of meals annually. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Nutritional Deficiencies on Plant-Forward Diets by Julia Ryan at balanced.org. It is important now, perhaps more than ever, that Americans eat for their health. This includes getting more whole grains, plant proteins, fruits, and vegetables. Nutrition information, however, can be difficult to understand, especially when generated with ulterior interests. For example, there are several frequently noted dietary quote-unquote deficiencies attributed to plant-forward and plant-based diets as compared to the standard American diet, or SAD. However, when following a balanced diet, this sentiment is simply untrue. The standard American diet, however, is characterized by inadequate intake of nutrient-dense foods like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Many of the claims supporting the value of the standard American diet are rooted in aggressive marketing schemes rather than honest, evidence-based science. These claims are also pushed by the food industries themselves, namely fish, egg, meat, and dairy. For example, it is difficult to find dairy research that is not funded by the dairy industry itself. The meat industry is much the same. Studies funded from the meat industry often produce results favorable for the industry. For example, one study claims that protein intake is negatively compromised if meat and saturated fat intake is reduced. The authors of this study received funding from the meat industry. As it is, most Americans consume much more protein than is required. The truth is that those who consume plant-forward or plant-based diets do not have more nutritional deficiencies than those who consume the conventional standard American diet or Western diet. In fact, those consuming plant-forward or plant-based diets experience greater nutritional benefits and health outcomes. Let's dissect the frequently mentioned dietary quote-unquote deficiencies. Iron. It is often claimed that those following a plant-forward or plant-based diet are iron deficient because they do not consume meat or consume little of it. Hemeiron is found in meat while plants contain non-heme iron. Though the bioavailability of non-heme iron from plant sources is less efficient than heme iron, there is no evidence that this results in an elevated risk of iron deficiency anemia. Bioavailability aside, meat consumption is not the most healthful way to obtain iron. In fact, it actually poses some risks. A high intake of heme iron has been linked to diet-related disease risks, namely for type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Conversely, the body actually does a better job of regulating non-heme iron. Calcium. Another frequently hypothesized dietary deficiency is calcium. Adverse health effects associated with low calcium intake include osteoporosis and bone fractures. Calcium adequacy is often associated with the consumption of dairy products. Remember the Got Milk campaign? However, research has found that fracture risk does not increase with plant-based diets as long as calcium intakes from plant sources meet adequate levels. There are many plant-based sources of calcium, including kale and broccoli. In fact, the calcium content in kale and broccoli is more effectively absorbed than the calcium in milk. In addition to their calcium content, these vegetables provide many other nutritional benefits. Protein. According to the 2015 to 2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the majority of Americans far exceed the recommended protein intake. Much of this excess is driven by the three major sources of protein in the U.S.: milk, beef, and poultry. Rich sources of plant-based protein are numerous and include lentils, peas, beans, soy foods, seeds, and nuts. Unfortunately, legumes are not a major component of the mainstream U.S. diet, partly due to the Western preference for animal products. Vitamin D. Safely enjoying the sun is a fantastic way to obtain adequate levels of vitamin D. In addition, certain types of mushrooms are a great dietary source if grown with UV light. Vitamin D can also be obtained through certain brands of fortified plant-based milks. Regardless of diet, however, most Americans would benefit from regularly taking a vitamin D supplement, as any diet is bound to be lacking in this nutrient, and because modern life means we simply do not spend enough time outdoors anymore. Vitamin B12. Plant-based sources of vitamin B12 include enriched cereals and soy products fortified with the vitamin. Nutritional yeast, a cheese-flavored seasoning, is often very high in vitamin B12, and non-soy plant-based milks increasingly are fortified with B12 as well. When not regularly consuming these foods on a plant-based diet, it is simply best to take a supplement. Those following an omnivorous dietary pattern, including the standard American diet, may experience more dietary deficiencies than those following a vegetarian diet. The standard American diet is not rich in fiber, unlike plant-forward and plant-based dietary patterns. The recommended fiber intake is as follows: 25 grams a day for women and 38 grams a day for men. In reality, fiber intake among U.S. adults is abysmally low, ranging from about 15 to 17 grams per day. It is difficult to make major changes to your diet overnight, but replacing 2 ounces of cooked ground beef with a cup of cooked beans drastically increases your fiber intake while offering the same grams of protein. Overall, there are numerous nutritional benefits of following a diet centered on plant-based foods. This dietary pattern includes rich sources of calcium, fiber, folate, magnesium, vitamin C, and vitamin E. The standard American diet often equates to low intake of fruits and vegetables, putting people at risk of numerous deficiencies. Not surprisingly, evidence shows that those following a vegetarian dietary pattern consume more fruits and vegetables than those following omnivorous dietary patterns. They also consume much less sodium than omnivores. A reduced sodium intake in combination with high fruit and vegetable consumption contributes to a reduced risk of hypertension and other diet-related diseases. In short, don't fear for your nutritional intake when replacing a few servings of animal products with plant-based alternatives. You are almost certainly improving it when you do so. You just listened to Nutritional Deficiencies on Plant-Forward Diets by Julia Ryan at balanced.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. Please share this episode with anyone who might be interested, and thanks for listening.